Um, at this point, I think we need to move beyond the American Revolution. And there's much more to be said about the American Revolution. Much of it is covered in that video series that you've seen a piece of, or that you're going to be seeing a piece of, Liberty. There are some excellent books available, but we can certainly turn our attention to the books that you're reading for this course, and in particular, the Boyer book on the short history of the United States has additional detail that's important. But it's time for us to move from one box to the next. That is, from the American Revolution to the early republic. It's the American revolutionaries who won the revolution, and then they began setting up a government. And actually, they had had a government earlier, the Continental Congress, and they had the Articles of Confederation. But this was not the kind of instrument that at least a number of the more powerful and influential figures among the founding fathers felt was needed. There was coming out of the revolution tremendous ferment, revolutionary ferment, all kinds of questions and aspirations, and all kinds of energy that was not controlled. There was chaos. There was a lack of coherence and control. And those in the upper classes, those in the planters and the merchants and the folks in the upper tier of the economy and the society, were frightened that they could be displaced, they could be dislodged, and there could just be absolute chaos, and the entire revolution could result in a big mess. And ultimately, even though it won, it might be defeated, or at least they might be defeated. And so they came together to put together a constitution, a document that would establish the structure of a new, coherent central government, national government, not only the structure, but the rules, how it would function, and so on. And so this was established in sort of a secret convention. And this is discussed a bit in Boyer. And there are other sources as well that talk about this. But they came up with a document, the Constitution of the United States of America. Often I find students blur together what the Constitution of the Declaration of Independence. Oh, yeah, it establishes democracy. And the Constitution did not establish a democracy. That was not meant to establish a democracy. Some of the founding fathers were opposed to rule by the people. They felt that the people, one person, Thomas Jefferson, although he was a rich guy from the plantation owning elite, he kind of believed in democracy, at least for white folks. He believed in human rights for everybody, probably even slaves, although he wasn't quite sure how to work that out. But he was favorable to democracy, to rule by the people. And Alexander Hamilton, who in some ways was much more conservative, said to him, "Your people, sir, is a great beast." And a number of the founding fathers looked at us as people who didn't measure up. We were ignorant, we were stupid, we were greedy, we were uncultured, whatever. And we should definitely not be ruling the country. We should not be having a democracy ruled by the likes of us. Instead, there should be a government by those who are fit to govern. And that would be a republic. A number of them were in favor of a republic, government by elected representatives. But they were not in favor of a democratic republic. They were not in favor of a democracy. What kind of a republic? And there were debates and discussions, disagreements among the founding fathers as they gathered in the Constitutional Convention. But what they came up with is summarized in this document here. And we've talked about the structure of the American government already. There's a very fine political scientist, well-known political scientist, Robert Dahl, who talked about the Constitution in a book at the beginning of this century. And he pointed out various aspects of the Constitution that were not democratic. One aspect, let's back up for a minute. The Declaration of Independence was a revolutionary document attempting to mobilize masses of people to overthrow the existing order, to break our ties with Britain, to make a revolution. The Constitution was a more conservative document. It was not a revolutionary document. It wanted to conserve things rather than overthrow things and establish a new order that would not be a disorder, a democratic disorder in the minds of at least the number of the founding fathers. Now, by the way, Jefferson and others argued there had to be certain human rights built into the Constitution, because originally that didn't exist in the Constitution. And so the Bill of Rights that provides for freedom of speech and freedom of press and freedom of assembly and so forth, that was added on later, and that was necessary in order to get the Constitution adopted by the various new states. But in any event, one aspect of the Constitution, right at the top here, was a tolerance of slavery. Slavery was built into the Constitution. And we'll talk about that more later. But in any event, and also the Constitution didn't guarantee the right to vote to every adult. We've talked about this before. White male property owners. The Constitution didn't take a position on who should have the right to vote. That would be up to the states. And the states generally said white male property owners at the very beginning. So one is a revolutionary democratic document. The other, the Constitution, is not a revolutionary document. And it's not a democratic document necessarily. That had to be fought for later. Related to this is the question of economics. Who has power in society, who has power in the economy, and who should have power. And that's one issue that helped to shape the Constitution. And then as the Constitution was revised and reshaped, this question came up again and again. Who has the power, the economic power? And this is a capitalist economy. So one issue is that the economy is owned and controlled not by everybody. It's not a democratic ownership and control of the economy. That would be socialism. It's something else, minority control of the economy and ownership of the economy. So there's that question that's inherent as a challenge in terms of democracy in our republic. But there was another, and in some ways a deeper economic challenge. I said before, we've got a capitalist economy, but there were two versions of capitalism, as it were, two variants of capitalism. One that was developing in the North, and a very different one that was developing in the South. And so that's what we're going to need to look at in our next segment of this class, of today's class. So we've gone from the American Revolution to the early Republic, and now we're going to be easing from the early Republic to the antebellum period. And I'll be talking about that transition more in our next segment. And I'll be talking about certain aspects of this republic that we're developing north and south. And then in our class next week, we'll look at that even further and see how that erupts into a horrendous civil war in 1861.